Hello, good evening.
السلام عليكم دكتور هايو.
Salam. Sorry, I'm late.
I'm just opening my camera to say hello to everyone again. So we are live here. We have 41 participants so far, and it's raising. So I want to just welcome everyone and pass it to the facilitator to start. Thank you, everyone. We are live on YouTube. Feel free to share the link that I'm going to drop in the chat to your friends and so on. Thank you.
Shall we start, everyone? Dr. Yusuf.
Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Juma Mubarakah. I hope you're in a comfortable place and that your Friday is peaceful and calm wherever you may be. I'm speaking to you from Marrakesh. We had rain this past night and this morning. And so we say alhamdulillah, but of course there are people who are sleeping in tents, many people in the thousands. And so even as we say alhamdulillah, we're also so concerned and hoping that they are well. We're also very mindful of a time of struggle and difficulty in so many places. We are here on this key topic of Islamic values and fossil fuels. We are together as people who have dedicated our time, our energy, our resources, our care to bringing progress and awareness and energy to this issue. And so I'm very grateful to be able to be of assistance in this conversation together. As usual, among facilitators, before we begin, we do want to ask if anyone wants to say anything or express any thought before we go into our panelists introducing themselves, but also responding to the first question, if that's okay, which is that why is climate change an important topic to be discussed from a Muslim perspective, or perhaps if you wish, the panelists, if you wish, from a faith perspective, why is climate change important to be discussed from a Muslim or faith perspective? And if you can respond to that question after introducing yourself. But again, before doing so, does anyone want to express a thought or any idea or question before we begin? Okay, Bismillah. We're going to start with Kiel, our friend, expert in the matters of fossil fuels and its impact on our world. Kiel, if you would introduce yourself and share your thought as to why we need to consider this topic from a faith or a Muslim point of view.
Thank you very much, Yosef, and good morning, everyone from Mexico. I'm joining you from Mexico today. My name is Kiel Kühne. I am German, but a global citizen, so very happy to be involved in this conversation. I was an exchange student in Indonesia many years ago and lived with a Muslim family, and that really kindled my interest for the religion and also my respect and wish to contribute to the conversation between people from different religions. Now, in terms of, I lead the Leave It in the Ground initiative and have been involved in the climate negotiations for about a decade, and I'm trying to contribute towards moving beyond the fossil fuel age with the work of my organization. Today, for this conversation, I have two things that I would like to offer. One is an image, and the other is a question. Let me start with the image, and I believe that speaks to the question that you have raised. The image is that of a water glass. So if you have a water glass and it starts tipping, there is a point when it tips over and the water flows all over the table or wherever it is. And that situation with a water glass is comparable to the state of our home planet, of planet Earth, and its climate situation right now. We are in the process of tipping over the water glass. And what is tipping it over is the most important part of that is fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels. So as you pass that tipping point, it means that some processes start, such as the Arctic sea ice melting or permafrost melting and emitting more, or the Amazon forest dying and releasing more carbon into the atmosphere, and this will accelerate, and it will be very hard to stop. I often explain this as a sort of domino effect, where one domino pushes over the other. So we have this global level tipping point, and we are in the process of tipping it over. And when the water spills, that will mean that our planet, we won't recognize it. It has been called a hothouse Earth. 8 degrees on average warmer, no ice on the poles, the sea level 60 meters higher. It will be very difficult to recognize. It will take probably several centuries, but even in the process of tipping it over, there are some people who suffer more than others. And I believe that the Muslim community, and especially the MENA region, is already suffering the impacts and will be suffering much more impacts even before the water has completely spilled. So we have heard projections for the MENA region this century to get 5 degrees higher temperatures. And if you've been living the summer heat, I think it's hard to imagine what 5 degrees more would mean. So this image of the water glass, for me, represents the global situation that we are in. And I think my colleagues here will be looking at it from a faith perspective and from a Muslim perspective. I think there is something to say about what our responsibility for keeping that water glass standing is. As people, I feel my responsibility as a global citizen, and other people may feel this responsibility as Muslims. So that is the image of the water glass. And the second thing I would like to bring to the table is a question. And this question appeared at our conference in Fez in February this year on Islam and the climate emergency. And it came out of nowhere, I would say. We're just sitting and talking with one of the students that helped, with some logistics and note taking. It was a PhD student who is, and I just asked him, what are you working on? And he said, some of you may know him, his name is Sufyan. And he said, I'm working on an interesting question to do with artificial intelligence. It's the question of these driverless cars. If there is an accident with a driverless car, who has responsibility? Who is responsible? Is it the person, the company who sold the car? Is it the software company that designed the mechanism for the car? Or is it the person who owns the car? There are 3 parties who could have responsibility, and it's a legal question. Who is responsibility if an accident happens? And now I didn't realize at the moment, but this question goes to the heart of the global conversation on climate change right now, because as the UN climate talks are set up, there is a theory or a way of framing it where everybody accounts for the emissions at the end of the pipe. So where it gets burned in that place, in that country, it gets counted, and that's the way how the national contributions are framed, and so on and so forth. What has happened with that is that fossil fuel companies and also fossil fuel exporting countries have said, this is not our problem. And so the fossil fuel industry, for example, the oil industry, has led us to talk about our carbon footprint and say, this is people's problem. People should reduce their carbon footprint. We are not responsible for the emissions that people are causing. We're not causing it. And so this overall situation is mirrored also on a country level. And having talked about the impacts of climate change and fossil fuels in the MENA region, there's also the side of fossil fuel extraction. And as you know, many countries, and in particular Gulf countries, are very big fossil fuel exporters. And right now, the discussion is, should you include only the emissions when you extract, or also at the end of the pipe when it's burning, what we call Scope 3 emissions. And the COP president has said, you have to be brutally honest about all your emissions, including Scope 3, but then at the same time, they don't disclose those emissions for the UAE national oil company. So I think that this question is very relevant at the moment, and the challenge is that the world is addicted to fossil fuels. Many of us use fossil fuels in our daily lives, and we have to break that addiction. So coming back to the initial question of who is responsible, I made a very radical suggestion to Sufyan, and I said, I think everybody should be responsible 100%. Who has programmed the car, who has built the car, and who owns the car. If they are all responsible 100%, all of them will make sure that accidents don't happen. And so applying this to the climate situation, we also think that everybody is responsible. Everybody is responsible for not tipping the glass over. And I would be, and this is the question that I am bringing to the table and offering here, who is responsible? I would love to hear the thoughts of my colleagues from an Islamic perspective. How would you answer that question? So thanks a lot for inviting me today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Kiel. I'm glad to present our second panelist, Ms. Nana Furman, Senior Ambassador from Greenpeace. Madam Ambassador, if I may, if you may share a little bit more about yourself and also your thoughts to the initial question of why is climate change important to discuss from an Islamic Muslim perspective.
Yes, thank you, Pak Yusuf, the way I call you in my traditional, original, where I'm from, Indonesia. I'm Nana Firman, originally from Indonesia, but like Kiel, I don't live in my country. I'm calling now from my home in California, and I've been working for Greenpeace, which is an international multi-faith grassroots organization, working with grassroots community in several countries around the world. So when we ask, like, what does climate change means for Muslims? So I always think that first, like as Kiel just shared a picture, like, you know, I looked up on the impact first, because that's what near and dear to people. We see like all the impacts that in terms of disaster, we've seen it like all over the world. That's like what people usually like connect first. So unfortunately, Kiel, like people don't really think about the root cause first. Like they always see the, you know, at the end of the pipeline, the impact of climate change. So we see the like all this like large disaster that happen all over the world, be it drought or floods or even like landslides that we've seen like happening in the last maybe 10 years, like more severe, and even like it's like more often, like we're becoming desensitized because it's all over the news. But then, like, you know, when we think about it, like a lot of people that work on this kind of issue already bring about the cause of this disaster, that because of, you know, the carbon dioxide emission that is, you know, like flooded our atmosphere, that caused the global warming, and then finally the climate change. And as Muslims, like we are called, but I think like there's other speakers here who are like more knowledgeable in Islam rather than me, but like we are called to be the Khalifa upon this earth, which is taking care of this earth, not to destroy that. But like, what have we done? We've actually like, you know, from our own like activities or like our economic choices, we are actually at the same time destroying the earth. So then, you know, like, and most of the carbon dioxide emission in our greenhouse gas is actually, I think like more than 50% are from man-made, like, you know, like activities. So then, you know, like we can say, if we take the analogy from what Kiel talked with us, Sofian, about the AI on the traffic accidents, then obviously we all have the contribution on this madness. But then who are really responsible from this? We need to also kind of like have that like clear, because then in a lot of cases, those who actually contributed the least are the ones that bear the brunt, the largest on this. Like for example, the people in the global south contributed only a little on the carbon emission from fossil fuels because they are still developing countries. They don't have like big industries. But then like when the big disaster happens, it's happening on their side of the world. So then and then they don't have the capacity to even like, deal with this disaster. So then I think like, we need also to have that clear in our negotiation or conversation in this like different global platform, who will take that responsibility. Like the responsibilities are going to be different, not like everybody bear the same responsibility. Yes, in terms of responsibility, everyone has responsibility, but then who's having the biggest responsibility because they already contributed like, more. So then I think like we need to have that also, the discussion in trying to, meaning like, to end this fossil fuel and me, like myself, like with Greenpeace, we are working actually in a treaty, the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, that we are calling also from the faith communities, the faith leaders to support this. So I can talk more about that, but I think like I have it my part in the beginning for that, so that you can have for others also to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you very much. I'm glad to introduce our third panelist, Imam Safet, the Director of United Nations Operations for Justice for All. Imam, we're very glad you're here. If you could as well share thoughts on why it's important to consider climate from a Muslim point of view.
Thank you so much, my dear brother, Dr. Yusuf, and to all the wonderful panelists. Good to see you online, Kyle and Nana, and I saw Nohad earlier, and some of the wonderful people. Brings back memories of when we were together, most of us in Fez, and had the chance to be with one another and to struggle with the answers to this very question. In various ways. Let me just begin, and then I'll answer your question very briefly, because in the tradition here in the States, we have what they call land acknowledgement, and so it's important to recognize that we are part of a human family that goes back many years, and that human family has a common ancestral mom and an ancestral dad. In our religious tradition, we speak of them as Adam and Hawa, or Adam and Eve. And so we need to recognize those that came before us, their contributions, as we need to recognize our contributions to those who will come after us. So this part of the land acknowledgement is, I'm speaking to you actually today from my home in New Jersey. This is the ancestral unceded lands of the Lenape peoples, who are part of Turtle Island. That's the name that was given to North America. Those peoples were dispossessed from their ancestral lands, and they were put onto reservations as a result of settler colonialism. And unfortunately, in other parts of the world, this is happening today, specifically in the situation that we find our brothers and sisters in humanity, both Muslim and Jewish and Christian, in Palestine and Israel and Gaza. And so we pray for peace and justice in that land, for all the peoples of that land. Al-Ardul Muqaddas, as they say in Arabic, the Holy Land. And we say that Allah Musta'an, may God help the oppressed. And one of the things about the native and indigenous peoples, they were peoples whose way of living and being in the world was largely one of balance and harmony. It was based upon mutual respect between humans and all of the natural world and all of our fellow earthlings and inhabitants. And there's a crying need in today's world for us to return to this type of ethic and practice. So with that in mind, what does Islam say about, or how does my religious teachings inform my interaction or understanding of how we should be within the climate. And I think there are different types of pictures that can be painted. Kyle painted one picture for us. I'll paint another picture for us. There's a saying in the prophetic, one of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is that al-ard kulluha masjida. The earth, the entirety of her is a mosque. It's a place of worship. It's a house of worship. So in a sense, we're in God's house. And what that means is that everything, every being that's in that house is a worshiper of God. And actually there's specific verses in the Quran that speak about the ways in which the various creatures, our various fellow earthlings, worship God and how they're organized into social communities. And so this idea that the entire world is a mosque is a place of worship. And when we think of a house of worship, we think of the idea of first a place of safety and security. It is sanctified. So it's sacred. Secondly, what comes to mind often is the idea of cleanliness, that is to be cleaned, it is to be maintained. Fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels is a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, yes, but it's also the major contributor to the pollutants and the air pollution, which is affecting our health in a very direct way. And so this idea of cleaning and maintaining the house of worship is then part of that picture of the entire earth being a house of worship, the entire earth being a house of worship, or God's house. And that all those that reside therein, all earthlings, are then worshipers of God. And therefore, when we look to our right and our left, and I want you to sort of think about this, whether you're on the prayer mats or sitting in a pew, and you look to the right or left, and you happen to see a squirrel next to you, as I have a squirrel running right now next to me in my backyard. And actually a chipmunk just passed by me a little bit earlier. And you say to yourself, what are you doing here? You wouldn't say that to a fellow worshiper as you're sitting in the pews in the church. So human and non-human are also part of that conversation. And the third thing that I think about when you think about houses of worship is the idea of scripture. Scriptures, reading of scriptures, recitation of scriptures, praying by scriptures, the Holy Quran, the Torah, the Injil, the Gospel, and so on. The various scriptures that have been given to human beings by persons of holiness or of blessed selection by God over the centuries and over the millennia. So you think about scriptures, and here for me the analogy or the connection is that why Islam is important is that the scriptures are written in verses. In the Arabic word for verses in the Holy Quran, or with reference to the Holy Quran, is ayah, which also means signs. But that's the exact same word that is used in the Quran and Islamic theology for all of the natural world and all beings within the natural world. So this idea of maintaining, cleaning the area out of its pollutants, of its poisons, the house of worship, making sure it's clean. Secondly, of course, that it's a sacred place. Thirdly, that all who reside within that place are also then sacred. And fourthly, that we read scripture or the signs of God, and those signs of God are disappearing. The destruction of our natural environment as a result of the modern lifestyles which we are living, driven by the burning of fossil fuels, primarily, is something that is destroying those signs. Biodiversity is disappearing. It's disappearing in scales unseen before in human history. Basically, the worshipers of God in God's house are being destroyed. They're being silenced, not by ones, not by tens, but by millions and billions. And that not only affects biologically the ecosystems in which we're in, so it deprives the ecosystems of their functionality, of their efficiency and effectiveness. We all are hurt as a result of that, but that also is actually destroying the spiritual core of the scripture, the natural world, which is a scripture which we are reading. And so I think that when I answer the question, I say, we have to maintain God's house. We have to keep it clean. We have to recognize and protect all that life that is within there, because they are also worshipers of God, and they are part of the signs and the scripture which we are reading from our hands, but there's also the scripture we read with our eyes and our senses. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I sort of will leave it there. Thank you.
Imam Safed, let me just also mention that the Imam can be with us until just the top of the hour. I'd like to have a follow-up question with you, if I may, Imam. Kiel's mentioned that we're all along the entire process, we're all 100% responsible. Nana mentioned that perhaps some are more responsible than others. Referring, if I may, Nana, say that referring to the fossil fuel companies, perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kiel or Nana. Imam, I'm asking you, where do you fall along that? Are we, and not that the two are mutually exclusive either, that we could be all 100% responsible, yet at the same time, some more responsible than others. Can you reflect on where the burden primarily lies, the responsibility, where it lies mostly?
No, thank you. Yeah, we're all responsible, but we're not all equally accountable. And that's a big point to keep in mind. Our lifestyle choices, our behaviors, our consumption patterns, all of those are in our hands. It's true. But the fossil fuel industry in particular, which is the largest emitter in terms of the extractions, the delivery, the burning of the fossil fuels, the largest emitter collectively globally of greenhouse gas emissions, of the carbon dioxide that's the main driver of greenhouse gas emissions, they are most responsible. And that needs to stop. We are told by the scientists that 75%, and Kiel can correct me if I'm wrong, or more, of the known fossil fuel reserves have to stay in the ground if we're going to be able to even have a chance to reach the limit of 1.5 to stay alive. So the fossil fuel industry is primarily responsible. And one of the things that the fossil fuel industry is very good at is, in addition to privatizing the profits and socializing the costs, in addition to that aspect of their business model, they're very, very good at saying it's a question of shedding off your lights. It's on you as the individual. And that's true, it's on us. But the fact of the matter is, the lion's share of what is bringing about the climate emergency is on the shoulders of the fossil fuel industry. And this needs to be addressed. The extraction, the transport, the refining, and the burning of fossil fuels and once again, I don't have my figures right now in front of me, but it's something like 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the lion's share responsibility is there. And then if you think about the health impacts of all that smoke and all that pollution on people's health and well-being, especially those who are most vulnerable in our communities, those who live in the heat islands of our urban centers, those who are elderly, those who are primarily peoples of color, those who are least responsible for climate change, yet bearing the biggest impacts. If you take into consideration all of that, the cancers, et cetera, and the illnesses associated with that, there's a huge liability there on the part of the fossil fuel industry to take care of this. And my last point on this is the fossil fuel industry's business model is one that cannot be changed. It's not like we can reform and we can adopt a new business model. Their business model is extraction, production, refining, and burning of fossil fuels. Christiana Figueres said there is no possibility of the fossil fuel industry adopting another business model. So the bottom line is we need to move to renewable energies in so many different ways. Conservation is part of the answer, but a big part is renewable energies. And we need to stop fossil fuels, hence the idea of no new fossil fuel productions. And although we're talking about the MENA region, I have to acknowledge that here in these United States of America, where I'm a citizen and where I belong, the United States over time is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. It is the largest producer of oil within the world. And it is, even under the current administration, which is supposed to turn back the way in which the Trump administration had dealt with the leases on public lands, it is actually provided, the Biden administration has provided more leases on public lands to the fossil fuel industry for new explorations, not existing reserve, new explorations than the previous president. So just wanted to share that. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes more than I'm supposed to.
You know, and if Nuhad will just indulge me 1 second, Imam, if you could just answer this one question quickly. You of course are director of United Nations Operations for Justice for All. I'm wondering if ever in that role, you have to, or that it may not contradict, but maybe you have to hold back or not fully express your point of view as a Muslim to the extent you would, or to the direct way you might have, if not for your role as also director of United Nations Operations for Justice for All. Have you ever found any, point of difficulty or challenge or questions of reconciling the two, a Muslim yet a director of a UN operations?
Well, I work for clarification, I work for a human rights organization that's accredited to the UN. So that's sort of the area that I work with. Have I found sort of reconciling between the two? There's always the realities of the world in which we live, in the moment in which we live. And so there are, for examples, one of the areas that we work on is we deal with our main focus is protecting the human rights of religious minorities around the world, specifically Muslim religious minorities. And one of our areas of focus, for example, is the Uyghur community in China. Here's the tie-in. The Uyghur community in China happens to be in what the Chinese call Xinjiang province, what the Uyghurs call East Turkestan. It is sitting on the largest oil and gas reserves in all of China. Hence this idea that the people have to be moved off the land and the persecutions taking place. But China is a very powerful actor in today's world, especially at the UN. So when I seek to try to find ways in which we can uplift the Uyghur situation and talk about it in different circles, we're immediately muted because of the incredible power of China in the world. And so I think, in answer to your question, yes, realities do smack you in the face. But I think when those realities smack you in the face, it's still important, especially as peoples of faith, to speak truth to power. Eventually, the power will concede. But it needs to be spoken to and called out. And I'm really here applaud the incredible efforts of those who were involved in the climate movement, especially the March to End Fossil Fuels in the recent time. There was a change that took place a couple of weeks ago in New York as a result of the marchers on the streets, people who were praying, as Rabbi Joshua Heschel used to say, praying with their feet, that they made a change in the way in which the UN was discussing the matter. And all the similar demonstrations took place around the world. So I think there is an opportunity to, even in those reality moments, to speak truth to power and to stand as strong as you can. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Imam, for the honesty of the answer. I'm grateful to continue and introduce Nuhad Awad, Ummah for Earth campaigner and global outreach coordinator at Greenpeace for the Middle East, North Africa, someone who's connected so many of us together over time, and we're certainly grateful to you, Nuhad, for that. And perhaps you can say a little more about yourself, Nuhad, and also reflect on the first question of the importance of looking at climate, explaining climate actions from Muslim perspectives.
Thank you, Yusuf, for the introduction. And I would like to welcome you all, especially now we have 48 attendees, and in total, we are 59 participants on the first webinar of Ummah for Earth for 2023 that talks about Islamic values and fossil fuels. We in Ummah for Earth, we started back in 2020, where we aim to create a climate movement within Muslim communities. We were 5 organizations at that time and 1 individual ally. Now we are 25 organizations and 7 individual allies. We have here in the panel Mr. Yusuf, who represents High Atlas Foundation. There is also Safa and the attendees from the same organization. We have Ikiel that represents Lingo, that's also part of the alliance. And there's Fatima and the attendees also. We have Nana Fairman that was an individual ally, and now she is part of Greenpeace that are also our organization, part of the alliance in USA. We have Imam Safet Katovic, who is brilliantly doing amazing work as an individual ally in USA. And we have Mr. Hayo, who represents Eco Masjid Foundation from Indonesia, and also not to forget to mention that he works with the Ulama Council in Indonesia. Ummah for Earth not only aims to create a climate movement within Muslim communities. Ummah for Earth aims to achieve climate justice by working together as organizations, as individuals, online and offline, to help these vulnerable people and make their voices heard on international conferences, to achieve social justice, to achieve equity, and to create solidarity. And this shows with many different things that we did, ranging from having a green guide for Hajj and Umrah, eco-conscious Ramadan guide, also having different activities that can mobilize youth and introduce what is really climate action and how we need to work all of others and all of us with each others in order to realize that climate change is a hazard that's affecting humanity and affecting the ecosystem. And we need to come together to face these challenges by having individual actions, as Imam Safat was mentioning. And he also mentioned that we need also to work on the policy level. So awareness and political level need to go in parallel, and also to work on a collective solutions and to present the solutions. And this is one of the things that we did by working on a solarizing mosques report that showed the importance of turning mosques on renewable energy and having these community buildings green, how this have a social effect, and at the same time how this have a financial effect by lowering and decreasing the electricity bill, and how this has an environmental effect by lowering emissions, especially CO2 emissions. And I'm not going to mention a lot concerning the first question, because Nana has talked very nicely. Imam Safat had talked about the prophetic, historical, let's say, but I would like to mention a verse from the Quran that says, قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, which means we were created as a khalifa, as stewards. So Islam teaches us to be stewards of this earth and its resources. And this was mentioned several times in the Quran. This means that it's our responsibility as humans to maintain the balance, al-mizan of this natural world. And it is very wise, wisdom, al-hikmah, to keep the harmony of this natural world. So as also Imam Safat said, like, all of us are responsible, but not all of us are accountable, but we are all accountable, each by differentiated responsibility, let's say, to God, how we treat environment. So I'm going to mention only the social justice, since climate change does not affect us, all of us, the same. Even if we are in the same country, there are communities, there are vulnerable people that are more affected than other people. So since there are poor people, since there are marginalized people, since there are less fortunate people affected, our Islamic principles of social justice emphasize that we need to take care of these people. And we need to ensure equitable access to resources for everyone. So addressing climate change and working on the issue of greenhouse gases emissions and stopping the new investments in fossil fuels is a way to promote social justice. And our Quran says that we are all interconnected. Since all of these creations, whatever your religion is, whatever your faith is, and whatever your kind is, even if you are part of the ecosystem as an animal, or if you are a human being, or if you are a tree, we are part of this ecosystem, and whatever we do has an impact on the world. And like, climate change does not have borders. So if I say, like, if I'm doing something in Lebanon, it can affect people in another part of the world. And if there is a country that's having emissions, and like Imam Safat was speaking about China, like we all know USA, China, and India are the biggest 3 emitters in this world. So there is many other communities in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Algeria, and Morocco are facing the adverse effects of climate change, and they are the least one that caused it. So we have a responsibility toward these people. We have an ethical responsibility and a moral responsibility to protect them and to work on preventing pollution and stopping the environmental degradation. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Nuhad. I am glad to continue and introduce our panelist, Hayu Prabowo from Eco Masjid Foundation and Ulama Council in Indonesia. Welcome, Hayu. If you may.
Okay, thank you. You are muted, Joseph. Okay, thank you. So yeah, thank you. Good evening from Jakarta, Indonesia, and nice to meet you again all in here after a fast meeting. So yeah, to answer the question that what is the Islam view of climate change? So actually, so we currently we are formulating the fatwa on the climate change, and of course, as has been mentioned, that Islam obligates everybody to take care of the earth as the steward of the earth, and plus that Islam is blessing for all of people around in the world. I mean, not only in the world, worldly like dunya or world currently, but also in the afterlife. So Islam give the blessing in this world and the hereafter world or alam. And from the Islam point of view, actually, and also us, actually, the big difficulty is the changing of the mindset and the Islamic law, actually, because previously fossil fuels as the bringing people, from the darkness to the, the good life, from the it's for the prosperity. But now we change it. Now fossil fuels become the kind of the causing disaster or injustice, as you mentioned. So here that in Islam we need to have a proper law, proper not logical but theological reasoning as to why currently fossil fuels become bringing people to injustice and is not good for the life, not bringing the prosperity anymore. So this kind of thing that we are currently kind of formulating and understand what is the Islamic basis to change, after it is good or previously is halal and currently haram. So that's actually the more easy way to say it. And this so we are currently formulating climate change. Also in the Quran we have the one chapter we call it Ad-Dukhan, Surah Ad-Dukhan, which is haze or fog. So in Allah says in this verse that in verses 10 to 11, wait then, O Prophet, for the day when the sky will be filled in haze, clearly visible, overwhelming the people. They will cry, this is a painful torment. So actually in Quran there is a chapter, which special chapter on the haze, and in the verses 10 to 11 it is mentioning this haze will be a torment to people, where it will, in the tafsir, it will bring people to starvation. So also this is also bring the whereby this kind of clue that it is kind of Quranic proof that of one of these change in the law and the mindset of the people. So in Islamic way, that we cannot only we taken the logical or rational only, but we also need to have the what you call the Qawliyah and Kauniyah. Qawliyah is the law or the proof provided by the Quran and Sunnah, which is the Prophet saying, Allah saying and Prophet saying. And secondly, we also need to integrate with the logical thinking. So we cannot rely only on logical thinking, but we also need to rely on the theological thinking as well. So this kind of view that we currently formulating, how we can integrate the Qawli and Kauniyah, the clue from the Quran and Sunnah, and plus the logical way. And then if we make this next is what is the way out, because we cannot just we cannot use fossil fuel anymore. Is there any clue in Quran whether we need to use some energy? And we come out that actually in Surah Yasin, Surah or chapter 36, Surah Yasin verses 80, Allah said that He is the one who gives you fire from green trees, and behold, you kindle fire from them. So actually, this clue that the fire is energy, and the fire or energy sources from tree. Actually, the fossil fuel, the oil and gas, and the what you call the coal is come from, actually the sources is from tree actually. So the tree is actually we believe that it is the true the clue from the Quran. Also the chapter 56 Surah Al-Waqiah verses 71 to 73, Allah said that the tree is a provision for the traveler. So at the time is confusing how this tree is a provision for the traveler. It is for the walking stick or for cooking. But actually, after the James Smith, inventing the what you call the steam turbine, so it's become true that the fire or the wood become the fuel of this steam turbine, and currently being used until now. So actually, that's actually the one that we would like to firstly change the mindset, and also the Islamic law, the way of people thinking of these fossil fuels, and secondly to find the alternative so that we can have the staging to different moving toward the more greener energy. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought there's a question from our audience in relation to carbon offset credits, which I think can relate to some, the responses of our panelists. It is something that we're very familiar with at the Highest Foundation. This year in 2023, we've planted 1.1 million trees with 7,000 farming families located in most of the provinces in Morocco. We're verified with Plan Vivo, which enables 80% of the sale of carbon offset units to return back to the communities. Companies, individuals, it's open for everyone to participate. Some countries have compel in various ways or degrees for companies to participate. I'm wondering, maybe even in relation to our last question, does it miss the mark? Is it a tool among many to reduce fossil fuels? We'll start with Kiel, but what is your thoughts in relation to carbon offset credits? And to what extent do you find it to be a viable solution?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a complicated issue because there are different levels on which it operates. One is just the CO2 in the atmosphere. And on that level, the theory upon which the offsets operate is that you emit 1 ton here, you absorb 1 ton here, and it stays the same. It would be this kind of balance. But the fact of the matter is that rarely happens. And if you take a ton of coal out of the ground and you burn it, you get 2 tons of CO2, and that will stay there for millennia. If you plant a tree, you will have to look after that tree. You will have to make sure that it's in a place there were no trees, no forest, and you would build a new forest, and then you will have to look after that forest for millennia to survive, to be equal to the ton of CO2 from fossil fuels. So this stability for millennia to keep the carbon in the trees, that's something that nobody has invented yet, how that could be done. So that's an assumption that maybe the forest will stay, but then climate change itself threatens the viability of forests. There are forest fires and other things. So that doesn't really work out. If you're looking at renewable energies, which are also used for carbon offsets, the assumption is you emit a ton of CO2, and then here you replace some kind of diesel motor or fossil fuel electricity with renewables, and then you get less emissions there. Now, I can tell you as a German, we have lots of solar panels, lots of wind energy in Germany, and we keep the coal power plants running. And so the renewable energy comes on top in addition to the fossil fuels. So that also doesn't work out. So basically the different models that people have come up with for trying to make this equivalence, it doesn't really work out. So that's the physical level. And then there is the societal level of the fossil fuel addiction. And on that level, it just helps perpetuate that addiction, that we do things with fossil fuels. We think we have offset the emissions, but it's questionable, as I just explained. So then the fossil fuel industry continues to earn a lot of money, talk to politicians in a way that keeps things going in the same direction. So on that level, the effect is very negative. So I would say that it's I think it's and then let me finish with a more positive thought. Who has said that if you are doing something that you wouldn't like to do, you're emitting fossil fuels, you're not happy about it, you want to do something about it, who told you that you have to go one-on-one? Why don't you say, I will, if I have to emit a ton of CO2, I will go and stop a fossil fuel project, and I will stop 1 million tons of CO2 from going into the atmosphere. So you can just decide for yourself, I will offset my actions that I'm doing because I'm forced to by structures, by some action that is 1,000 times, 1 million times more effective than the damage that I'm doing. And I will do much more good in the world than simply trying to, one-on-one stop these emissions. So that's my perspective, but I think we should hear from our Muslim colleagues what they think.
Let me just add this to Nana, Hayu, and Imam Safed. Imam Safed has just a couple minutes, so maybe we'll start with Imam Safed if that's okay with everyone. But there was another point by our audience, Professor Hamzawi, who points to the issue of plants. Whoever quote from the Hadith, whoever plants a plant and someone eats from it, even a bird or an animal, the one who plants it is a charity for him or her. It's a charity. Does that Hadith figure into your calculation of carbon offset credits, which deals with vegetation cover, plant life? Does that make you more amenable or open or supportive of the carbon offset approach?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification, Kiel. Yeah, that hadith, actually, there's another continuation of that hadith in a different narration. The Prophet said on a different occasion, which is anyone takes benefit from it, human or non-human, a bird puts its nest in it, or someone stays under its shade, you get the blessings associated with it. And so that's this idea of planning for the long term, the long haul, even the generations that are not yet here. Indigenous peoples used to say that we not so much inherit the world and the land from our ancestors or those who came before it as much as we borrow it from our children. And so this idea of following it forward. With regard to tree planting, actually, that is an important aspect, and reforestation and preventing deforestation is an important aspect of the ultimate answer to the situation, but it's not the only one. But definitely the idea of tree planting is very much encouraged in our tradition. The Fiqh Council of North America, the Islamic Council of Jurists, when they released their fatwa, which we had worked on divestment from fossil fuels, they highlighted specifically the planting of trees. And I want to really congratulate the High Atlas Foundation for that effort. They are the lungs of the world, as they say, and we co-respirate with one another in the way forward. So it's one of the areas that with the ISNA's Green Initiatives Committee during Ramadan, we actually award or plant with the Arbor Day Foundation trees here in the United States for those who successfully complete the Green Ramadan campaign as institutions. I want to just also point out that, and just in recognition from Morocco again also, that only 2 countries in the world are on target to meet their national contributions, nationally determined contributions. That is Morocco and Gambia. The rest of the world is not anywhere near reducing what they need in terms of carbon emissions. And one way to reduce carbon emissions, of course, is this idea of offset with trees. I also want to just highlight, we need to be very careful of technological fixes that are being offered up, including by the fossil fuel industry, that has investments in what they call carbon sequester technologies. And I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, these technologies are extremely cost intensive. They require a lot of burning of fossil fuels in order to produce those technologies, and there's no guarantee that they're going to be successful, like putting stuff into the ground and so on. And once again, I leave that to the experts that are here. Trees definitely are one way forward, but it has to be part of a mix of ways in which we deal with the situation we're in. But the biggest way to deal with it is honestly just to turn off the spigot, leave it in the ground. This idea of if it doesn't come out, it won't be burned. And that will force us to make decisions to do things differently. COVID taught us globally we can do things differently. It did. We didn't think we could change our lifestyles. We changed our lifestyles significantly. We can do things differently. And so I think we should take from examples, highlight, celebrate the successes of others. And I'm highlighting Morocco in this case, and Gambia. And the world has a lot to learn from the idea of reforestation, as well as preventing deforestation. And connected to that, you have, for example, also this idea of the cattle industry, the idea of reduction of meat consumption, specifically beef consumption, because that is one of the reasons that there is the clear cutting of trees and deforestation to make room for pastoral lands for the feeding of cows. And we should move towards a more vegetable-based diet individually, collectively as a human society. Thank you. I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes, so I do apologize, but I will be listening on for a few minutes.
Thank you. Nana, would you kindly
Yes.
reflect on the issue of carbon offset credits?
Yeah, so it's funny, sometimes this is just my personal point of view. I feel like the offset credit, giving us in the really just words, giving us the excuse to make sin. So it's you're supposed to be good, not avoid making any sin, right? So it's sometimes I feel like this is an excuse, but then we need to find a solution because we are in a mess right now. So we're talking about trees, and I see trees also as part of the nature-based solution that is big conversation in the climate space, which is trees is already function as the absorbance of carbon dioxide, and that's what when we are talking about climate issues, we basically talk about 2 big things, where is the land use change, which is cut the trees, the deforestation, so then we don't have that function, and then the one that produce the greenhouse gases emission, which is big part of it is the carbon dioxide, which is from the use of fossil fuels. So then we need to plant a lot of trees and preventing deforestation, but yet we also need to stop, like, to end these fossil fuels, because now we have the technology to have like alternative energy. So then we need to at least like stop the, like the new fossil fuel infrastructure or future fossil fuel infrastructure, and then trying to phase out whatever we have right now. And then that's why I mentioned in the beginning that I'm working on the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which is like, like we have three objectives on that. First is like end the expansion of any coal, oil, or gas production, because if we keep planning to have like more new like infrastructure, then like what's the point? Like, we need to end that expansion. And then also like, having that like phasing out what we have existing production of fossil fuel. So like we need to plan like when are we going to retire this current existing infrastructures in terms of like expanding like fossil fuel. So for example, like here my Imam Safir and myself, like we involved in stopping like the new pipelines that is going to be built by the US government, because they promise that they're not going to expand any fossil fuel and they're going to transition to new renewable energy, but then they're still giving permits to new fossil fuel pipeline. So what's the point? Like, so we need to stop it, because this is like, we have to hold accountable also to the government and politician on this. So then, like phasing out also, and then also like, how can we ensure that there is a global just transition to the renewable energy, so that everybody will get access? Because like more, I think like about a billion, almost like 800 million or almost like billion people like don't even have access to electricity as of now. So then, like how can they also have the access to electricity, but not the fossil fuel base, but like jump, like doing the big leap to the renewable energy. So that's what I wanted to highlight, that like we need to like prevent the deforestation and planting our trees everywhere, like and our forests, but then we also have to stop these fossil fuels from expansion.
I'm going to go to Hayu, if you would, then we'll go quickly to Kiel and then to Nuhad. Hayu, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I'm talking here from the economist, of course. Yeah.
Go ahead.
You are muted, Hayu.
Yeah, actually, I'm talking about from the point of view of Islamic economics. I'm the Islamic economist. So yeah, so the capitalist is only afraid on money. So to stop, as we would like to stop the use of fossil fuel, then we need to stop to encourage these capitalists to use the fossil fuel. One way is to increase the production cost. The production cost can be increased if they analyze that the use of fossil fuel will be very expensive too. So the carbon trading, kind of facilitate this one to be a transition into stopping the fossil fuel use. So that's actually first one. So this also the planting tree, there's several benefits, as I mentioned earlier, that the tree is the source of energy for the poor people. Actually, poor people mostly uses of wood as the primary source of energy, and currently about 6% of the population of the world using the wood as a primary energy. So planting tree not only extracting the CO2, but also reducing the emission, but also providing the fuel for these poor, and creating the path toward the stopping the fossil fuel. So this actually the second one, and the third one is the kind of the from the Islamic perspective, whereby we should plant the trees, the seed, even we know that there will be the end of the world. So actually planting tree is the most important one to be for Islam, because there's many benefit from the Islamic perspective and Islamic teaching. And I believe that this carbon trading facilitate this kind of pathway, even though it is not perfect, but I think it's facilitated toward the stopping of the fossil fuel, because people will stop, buying the most expensive product because of this fossil fuel, and start using the more cheaper and more, subsidized from this high emitting industry. So that's my point.
Thank you. Kiel, go ahead with an additional comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring one piece of information to the table, and also maybe it sounded like I'm against tree planting. I'm not. I think it's a necessary part of the solution, and we have to plant many trees around the world to weather the storm of the climate emergency. It's just the role in the system that this plays in perpetuating fossil fuels that is problematic. And the piece of information I'd like to bring to the table has to do with something with the balance that has been mentioned before, Al-Mizan. So if we think we can, and also, the big offsetting mechanisms have been promoted mostly by big polluters. So they're happy about it because they can keep going. And then they tell the story, oh, we're an oil company, but we're planting all of those trees, we're green, we're great. So if you look at the proportions, the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning it's the stored energy, as Dr. Hayu mentioned. Coal is from trees back in the day, but that was accumulated during millions and millions and millions of years. Trees have stored that energy, and now we're taking it out in a few years and burning it and putting all that carbon into the atmosphere. And if you want to reabsorb that through trees, just in a few years, it doesn't work. There's so much carbon in those fossilized trees that you cannot absorb it with all. If you plant trees over the whole surface of the earth, you will not be able to absorb the carbon from the fossil fuels that we are burning at the moment. So it's too much, and we will need tree planting and building fertile soils and so on to reabsorb the CO2 that is already up there in the atmosphere and going to stay there and tip over the glass from the fossil fuels that we have already burned. So we really need the tree planting, and but if you use it to burn more fossil fuels, it's really tipping the glass over.
Would you know offhand how many earths do we need to plant trees on in order to offset the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning and need to, reverse? I mean, what do you know the numbers involved there? It's an interesting point you raise, that there's not enough surface area on Earth to plant in order to offset what we've released.
Numbers, but I have a sense that it would probably be something like, say, 5 years of fossil fuel burning, or 10 years of actual fossil fuel burning right now. That's what we could offset by planting the whole world in trees, but that's it. And we have all the historic emissions from, the whole industrial age already in the air, and that's much more than that. So it just the numbers don't work out.
There's a plane going above me. Nuhad, please share any thoughts on this topic or anything you'd like to say.
I would like to say that, like, planting trees needs, at least after we plant these trees, 20 years for them to really start absorbing the needed greenhouse gases emissions. So since we are working to achieve climate justice and we talked about social justice, let us not promote false solutions. One of them is planting trees and carbon credits and all of these offsetting schemes that they are trying to promote as a solution. Why? Because first of all, this serves injustice. And when we say it serves injustice, because the offsets are not treating the problem from its source. They are putting price on nature, and we cannot allow rich countries or countries that are able to buy lands in poorer countries, and this is what's happening lately by an oil country, to keep polluting the atmosphere to keep their ongoing business. And yeah, we are planting trees. No, this is not. These offsetting projects are distorting economies, are taking lands and resources away from the local communities. And this is one of the things that Nana was mentioning that she's working with Imam Safet on. And at the same time, not protecting the nature from the emissions themselves. And this, as a civil society and as a climate community, distracts us from the needed action that we need to advocate for. The businesses, the countries, the governments that are emitting need to lower their emissions and need to stop delaying and dampening the ambitions and working on having less CO2 and less other greenhouse gases emissions in the atmosphere. We are already behind. We started, like, we are having COP28, which means this is that 28 years, and it's 29 because there was a lack of 1 year due to COVID. So we have been for 29 years asking to take concrete actions. And at the beginning, we were talking about medications. Then in 2015, we had the adaptation fund. And then last year, we had the loss and damage fund. Because why? Because we were late to act. We are speaking about loss and damage. And unfortunately, till now, we don't have a mechanism for that. Okay, yeah, thank you, you did the fund, but how this money is going to go to those who need it? And still no. So it's a big no to offsets and for net zero, and let polluters pay for what they did, and let the countries that have benefited for many years and emitted a lot pay their historical and hold their historical emissions and be accountable for it and pay for it, and let the governments who are emitting a lot cut their emissions. And this is what we need. They cannot pretend to balance out and continue their business as usual by burning coal and by saying, or like emitting and saying, like, you know, we are protecting the forest, we are planting trees, and a fire can take all of the trees that is planted, and what else? So yeah, this is, let's say by the last statement, net zero is good enough for greenwashing, but this is not what our planet needs.
I see. It's not enough. You know, I want to just mention a thought. You know, life is so challenging for everyone, but certainly for youth, at least here in Morocco and then so much of our region. And we try to imagine someone, myself, 54 years old, and what would it be to be in their shoes at 17, 18, 19, 20 with all the pressures and yet so many barriers and external challenges and difficulties and unfairness, where sometimes the more we're educated, the more likely we are to be unemployed. And we think, well, what can we do in this world? What is in my reach as a 18, 19-year-old? Is it in my reach to be able to convince companies, or to be able to affect global trends, or to advocate differences in national laws? It's beyond, it's not something I can do now. It's the planting season now. And so what can I do in such unfair times? I can reach a tree. I can reach a sapling. I can plant. And so on the one hand, I hear what you saying. I know Imam Safet was more of like, it's part of the toolkit. I think Nana was more in that way. Kiel and Nuhad, I felt more in listening to you that you're for trees. You would never be, of course, and it's part of our way of being a Muslim and a human citizen, and part of our natural life, and we need to plant. But in terms of it affecting the balance, perhaps you may be less hopeful. But what do you say to the millions and millions and millions of us who can't advocate, who've never had understood that we have that kind of voice, who don't have such levers, who are not on a webinar, who simply can perhaps afford a 10 dirham, a $1 or €1 sapling and put it in the ground. And that's the extent of the activism that one can do. I mean, what about that? And yet be 100% part of the solution.
Thank you, Yusuf, for raising this question. And here I would like to tell you this, if you are saying that can be done on this, if you can say that can be done on an individual level, it's good, but it cannot be done on a governmental level. This is not a solution. If a person decides to plant, I plant trees. Well, I was in Jordan and I planted a tree. This is a very good deed. It's, as you mentioned, it is sadaqah, charity in Islam, but this is not a solution. And as individual, here I can go back to what we did in 2021. There was COVID restrictions, lockdowns. We had Truth or Dare platform. And in the Truth or Dare platform, there was truth that it was a game to mobilize youth from the ages that you were saying. These youth that are sitting on TikTok, on Facebook, they were playing this game. And the truth were scientific information related to amount of plastic thrown in the ocean, related to amount of water used when we shower, and or hadith for Prophet Muhammad as don't waste water even if you are in a running river, or if it is doomsday and you have a plant planted. And the things that they were asked to do, they weren't on a community level because there were restrictions on having meetings and for people to have a group work. So they were asked to lower their emissions. How? By unplugging the appliances that they are not using, by lowering the energy that they are using on home, by stop the single-use plastic, straws, bags, and use like tote bags instead. And there were many different things that they can do on individual level and has an effect, and all of the youth can afford it, and has also relation to preserving the natural world. Hopefully I was able to.
Thank you, Nuhad. And we have just a few minutes, and I want to jump to the third question. And we have, again, we're going to go sort of rapid round here. It also relates to one of the comments from our audience. Have you recorded environmental fatwas that respect the three meanings of mercy, cooperation, and repair, particularly addressing fossil fuel? Fatwas. Now, one of the comments from our audience was looking at the diversity of Islamic societies. And there are particularities in that we have in the Ummah. That we are heterogeneous in essential ways. So the question is, broadly speaking, within that greatness of diversity, how do fatwas relate? And secondly, perhaps our panelists can reflect on the importance of fatwas within the respect in regards to climate change and fossil fuels. How do fatwas relate to the vast diversity of Islamic life and Islamic societies? And how important is it to have fatwas to help us navigate the climate in relation to the fossil fuel issue? Does Imam Safed hear us? Okay, we're going to go to
I can hear you, but I can't go on camera.
Okay. Maybe literally, Imam Safed, a little 1-minute thought, and then we're going to go to Hayu. We're going to, just quickly, if you can reflect on that, Imam.
Say 1 second again what you said, please.
You know what, Imam? I'm going to go to Hayu.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, Hayu, would you reflect on that if you caught what I had mentioned?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yeah, fatwa is actually the most important one that in Islam that we, because in Islam we live for the ibadah, is for the we respect to the God. So the fatwa is very important, and fatwa is covering many aspects, one of which is the fossil fuel. So fatwa is covering the mercy, whereby environmental fatwas that respect the concept of mercy emphasize the importance of compassion and care for all of Allah's creation, including the environment. So fatwa is responsible for the use of sustainability. One of the fatwa is on the waste management. Waste management is very simple in Islam. Actually, after the fatwa is established, firstly is that we need to avoid the wasteful behavior, and secondly that we need to avoid extravagant use. So this actually causes the waste, including the emission because of our behavior of wasteful activities, and secondly is for the extravagance of the life. And secondly, the fatwa also cover the cooperation, whereby the fossil fuels such as the oil and gas and coal are major contributors to environmental pollution and climate change. Now, environmental fatwas that respect the principle of cooperation may stress the importance of international and community cooperation to reduce fossil fuel consumption and transition to cleaner energy sources. So the fatwas can promote collaborative efforts to address the global challenges posed by the fossil fuel. So the fatwas not only provide the law, but also the way how these laws can be implemented.
Thank you. We're going to go to Nuhad Ismaili and Nana. I see Nuhad's hand up, but can you also address, do we have sufficient number of fatwas? Do we need more fatwas? Or Nuhad Afek, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Yusuf. And I would like to say that last year, Egypt Dar al-Ifta, that's responsible for issuing religious fatwas or like religious edicts, they approved the first fatwa charter to fight climate change based on Islamic law Sharia principles. And this came before COP27 that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh. Why? In order to help, or like, this is the way that Dar al-Ifta wanted to contribute to implement the SDGs, Sustainable Development Network, and to help in resolution of climate change problems and to raise awareness on the danger of climate change. So like Al-Azhar Imam Al-Tayyib had talked many times last year, and this had a very nice effect on mobilizing communities. As a result, after we returned from FES conference, where Yusuf, High Atlas Foundation and Lingo were organizing, part of the organizers along with the Sharia faculty, we took the importance of working on a fatwa, and we as Greenpeace office in Indonesia, alongside our colleague Hayo and other organizations on ground, are working now inside Indonesia to have a fatwa related to climate change and fossil fuels. Also, previously in Indonesia, they were fatwas on this regard. And because like we are approximately near the end of our, maybe I will not take the chance again to speak, I would like to thank the interpreter Farah from Language Platform for being with us during this. I would like to thank my colleagues at Greenpeace Middle East and North Africa, Madeleine Arnaoud, and Wasim. Madeleine is our comms lead and Wasim is our digital lead. They are the soldiers that are behind this work. And I would like to thank also, she was part with us, our project lead, Veronique Garifalo. They worked hard to have this webinar, and Fatima from from Lingo organization. She's based in Lebanon. And I'll give back the floor to you, Nana. And I think you were part of the fatwa that happened in 2016. So maybe you can tell us more.
Yeah, so as Imam Safid mentioned, there's a fatwa to divest from fossil fuel in the US with the Fiqh Council of North America in 2016. But right now, I'm also like with Greenpeace in Indonesia, we are working on the fatwa specifically on coal, because coal is a big issue in Indonesia. So we chose like, specific, and then looking at that, it's very difficult because we hardly have like, references on, like coal, but then we are working on the, producing the fatwa on coal specifically, because then I just want to make this reflection that our commitment all of us, commitment and movement towards this climate justice has a moral power to change the system behind this crisis. As an individual, because there's a question about individual or like the youth, and then also like from the question of the audience, this is an individual duty, fardu ain as a Muslim, but also it's a communal obligation, fardu kifayah. So we cannot do it just Nuhad or Wasim or Kiel or Nana or Imam Safed or Dr. Hayu, but we are also a communal. So how can we do it also as communal? And then fatwa is one of the way also that we can help to solve this problem. So hopefully, inshallah, we will be working together.
You know, I want to take another minute. One of our audience members asked a question about interfaith, and I know Imam Safed, you dedicate yourself to that in a very important. We all do, but Imam, we have a question. Have there been any joint initiatives to call for fossil fuel-free zones and climate action from an interfaith perspective? Can you speak about interfaith and climate actions from that point of view? Imam.
Yeah, thank you. I just one point about the fatwas. Fatwas are at the end of the day advisory opinions. So empowering fatwas, this is where governments step in. So the idea of religious scholars getting together to do fatwas or religious verdicts is once again, it is a advisory opinion. People can take it or leave it, but once governments implement it, it happens. So it's important to have fatwas that provides the religious framework, especially in Muslim countries in particular, where you have governments which, at least in the constitutions of most Muslim countries, affirm that they have some sort of a connection to the Sharia or Islam sacred law. But also fatwas themselves that are drafted by religious scholars have to be specific. And unfortunately, I think some of our fatwas fail the test. They get into platitudes and they do not deal with the specific issues directly in front of them. So for example, fatwas which do not specifically address the fossil fuel issue in a very clear terminology are not really beneficial to what we're talking about. With regard to interfaith programs and activities, Green Faith has been a major organizer internationally of interfaith voices coming together for the environment. And it's a lot of important work that's being done. One of the areas is the highlighting of the various Islamic declarations and encyclicals. Most recently, the Pope has come out with his 2.1 version or 2.1 edition on the environment. And other religious communities are sort of following suit. So I think there's a theological work that's going on in conversation with one another, but there's also the boots on the ground and the advocacy work that is also happening as well, where different faith leaders are going together, either involved in direct action or involved in various types of pressuring of their officials. Elected officials in the case of democratic nations and other officials by pushing them in that direction. And thirdly, there is this whole idea of working within the context of the interfaith movement for the greening of the practices of the faith communities themselves. 84% of people worldwide identify with a faith community, so that there's sort of, I would say, a positive and constructive competition and at certain levels working together on the issues of the environment. And it has to do with everything from signing letters to putting solar panels on houses of worship and church-owned, mosque-owned, temple-owned, et cetera, properties. So I don't know if that answers the question, but Green Faith has done a lot of work, but others have doing that work as well. Thank you.
Let me just also add that in Morocco, the Hayat's Foundation receives land from different faith communities, Moroccan Christian community, Moroccan Jewish community, to build nurseries. We also receive land from the Moroccan government, but the gift of land is essential for farming families to have nurseries because they can't forego their barley and corn to build a nursery. Families need to harvest every year. And so the gift of land allows for the transition toward organic fruit tree agriculture, and interfaith plays an important role in providing that land without cost. So we are at an end. I just want to, first of all, thank you, Nuhat, for thanking everyone. And we all echo that. Thank you for inviting us and being part of this conversation. I just hope that everyone gained from it. There are some takeaways that I'll carry. And some of them is that beware of the tipping point, that sometimes what we feel to be tipping us back to where we need to be may not be enough. What would tell someone say one other takeaway, what will you remember from the conversation?
I can remember that it is very important to keep up the work, to work on raising awareness on an individual level and engaging with youth, as you suggested, Yusuf. I remember that also we need to work parallel on policy level with governments, as Kiel was speaking, and to work with religious leaders, as Hayo mentioned. I remember that we need the interfaith work. Like we have a Lebanese proverb, one hand alone cannot clap. We need to clap and have a voice. Like you cannot do that. So
and we want to be supportive in the endeavor that you described related to fatwas in any way we can. Remember, our conference was at the Islamic faculty in Fez. And so the last question is very relevant to where this conversation began. Of course, it began way prior, but our immediate group met in Fez, and so let's remember to bring back whatever we can to the Islamic faculty in Fez. With that, I just again, Juma Mubaraka li Mohima, that we have this special day of Friday. We also, for many of us, conclude the work week. We're all hearts are mending and torn all at once, and just wishing everyone peace in our hearts and peace with each other all the time, inshallah.
Thank you all for making this a success and for building on a meeting where all of us were, and that we can do another conference next year to build on the outcomes and what have been done and what needed to be done. Thank you for Ummah for Earth Allies who have taken responsibility to make this ongoing through all the year. And I would like to say that we are having 5-side events at the Faith Pavilion in COP28, which most of them around interfaith work, because this is important. This is what's needed to be done. And this is our duty as human beings to protect the world that we are part of. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Be well. Thank you, panelists, each and all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Juma Mubarak.
Juma Mubarak.